Hey everybody, welcome to Ordinary Effort. We're a bunch of random fans, get some random baseball players, and usually we are here trying to not biff immaculate grid, but today is year to, well, not the date, but to the day since we started Ordinary Effort. And Josh, we decided let's do something special for this. Let's reach into the history books for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't believe it's been a year since we started the show. We really just did this to sort of share memories of baseball, connect with other people who love baseball. And this is a pretty good example of that. We're joined tonight by Chris Baker, who's the great grandson of Frank Home Run Baker, Hall of Famer. And we were first introduced to Home Run Baker by playing Immaculate Grid. We are not, and I'll say this a couple times tonight, we are not dead ball historians. There are lots of people in the chat who know much more about that era of baseball than us. We knew Home Run Baker as a cool name to put on the grid, who would score pretty well, and we started to look more into his career. And Chris approached us on Instagram, and we approached him about coming on for a conversation. So super grateful, Chris. Thanks for doing this with us.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think like I said, a lot of people in the chat know a lot more than us about Frank, but I figured I would just start it off with just a little bit from his Saber bio, with a lot of thanks to Marty Payne, who wrote the bio. It's really great. If you have not read it. So I'm just going to give a little snippet of it. But Frank was one of the most accomplished third basemen of the early 20th century and a key figure in baseball's deadball era. As part of Connie Mack's legendary $100,000 infield with the Philadelphia Athletics, he played a crucial role in 3 World Series championships from 1910 to 1913. He led the American League in home runs for 4 consecutive seasons, despite playing in an era when home runs were rare, and earned his famous nickname of Home Run Baker after hitting clutch home runs in the 1911 World Series against Hall of Famer Christy Mathewson and the New York Giants. Beyond his power hitting, Frank was a strong defender, leading the league in putouts at third base multiple times. And after his major league career, he remained involved in baseball, managing in the minors and scouting talent. In 1955, he was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, securing his legacy as one of the all-time greats. And as I said, we're joined by Chris tonight, Frank's great-grandson, to talk about his legacy. Chris, I think we'll start it off by just tell us a little bit about how you came to be the historian in the family, and what that was like for you.
Well, it could be as simple as I'm kind of the only one left, but it's deeper than that, and it's probably worth sharing that with the viewers. Thank you for everybody that tuned in tonight and takes an interest in Frank Baker's history. I appreciate it greatly. Really, it started with having grandparents who were borderline historians, especially my grandmother. My grandfather, of course, was his son and lifelong farming partner. So they were pretty tight. Like, they lived on the same farms for years and dined at the same table every night for most of their lives. So they were pretty close. And, making that story a little shorter than it needs to be right now, my grandfather obviously wound up with a lot of his collection. He had several sisters who probably wound up with some pretty nice things too, but that most of them were gone by the time that I came around. So I don't know what happened to that, but what was here was guarded by my grandmother after my grandfather passed away. And she, like I said, was pretty heavy into history. She didn't even want me fooling with it. She became ill. I actually took care of her for several years while she was ill. And after her passing, of course, everything was left my responsibility. So I took it upon myself to finally not just dig into what was here because I knew most of that, but I wanted to dig into like how he got it. Because in their day, my grandmother growing up, they didn't really have the resources readily available as I did to get the backstory on a lot of the things that were here. Unexplainable photos from his baseball career that most people have seen, but there's a few that they haven't, and just little things like that struck my interest enough to really start, you know, thinking about taking care of this stuff. So I went into some of the items that needed some care. I did a whole lot of research and reached out to some awesome people that didn't mind helping me out and giving me the information that I needed instead of just sending me somewhere where I would spend, thousands of dollars trying to restore something that I could take care of myself. I brought a lot of things back into good shape and put a lot of time in it. And it probably none of it would be possible actually without my grandmother and grandfather actually just keeping this stuff all these years, not putting it into an auction or, trying to sell it somewhere, which I think happened to a lot of the other items. If you dig enough, you'll find, where a lot of things went through heritage and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's
So
awesome.
in a nutshell, I mean, that's how I wound up with it. And some of it got a lot cooler the more I knew about it. Some of it
Sure.
already knew what it was, just from general conversation. So
Yeah. So Chris, I feel like the home runs in the World Series that got him his nickname are probably how most people come to know Frank. But you have a good deal of his history from sort of the beginning of his career to the end, and I'm wondering if you'll share a little bit about that, about Frank's career.
So I mean, if you don't mind me running through my notes, it'd probably be
Absolutely,
easier.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
I mean, a lot of the people who probably tuned in tonight, if you are familiar with Frank, you know that he started out as a pitcher in his high school baseball team in the little town of Trapp that I'm sitting in now. And one thing that isn't mentioned very much in his history that I don't mind sharing is Frank had a brother named Norman. It's mentioned in a few articles that have been written. I've noticed it, and props to those that dug that deep to find that information. But Norman was a really good pitcher. He actually went to Philadelphia and tried out and was never really dismissed. He just never went back. He didn't really like being in the city and traveling. It wasn't for him. So he never went back up there. So according to my grandfather, a lot of Frank's hitting ability came from growing up trying to hit Norman when he was young. He went on and played for Ridgely, Maryland after that, which is probably about 40 minutes from here drive in today's time. So it put it into perspective how much time he spent traveling and playing baseball. If you really dig into playing for 2 or 3 teams at the same time on the Eastern Shore, I mean, he's playing for Pocomoke, Cambridge, and Ridgely all at one time. At one time, and that's playing 7-8 ball games a week. And but when he played for Ridgely is where he met Buck Herzog, and of course a lot of old time baseball historians know who Buck Herzog was, of course, with the Giants, and Buck's a legend, of course. But Buck taught Frank how to play third base, and this has been written about a lot, but I don't think that people understand the significance that this left on Frank his entire life. There is a picture in this house, which was my grandfather's house, and Home Run built this house right before he passed away too, actually. So there's a picture that's still in this house of Buck Herzog that's been here ever since Frank was alive. It hung on the wall the whole time, just as respect to Buck for, finding something for him. He found him a spot, really, at third base when he put him on there. Originally taught him how to play it, and he got good enough to be, as you said, one of the best third basemen of the game in that era. So it was a very pivotal moment for Frank to meet Buck Herzog, which he was making $5 a week He was making
Wow.
$5 a week, which I don't know what that translates back then, but it probably was better than we're laughing about. But he went to 15 a week playing for Sparrows Point, which is pretty much in Baltimore, so that's a little bit of a hike from here as well. Went on to play in Cambridge, and that's inevitably where he would meet his first wife that died of influenza. Not to bore the viewers with stuff that they probably don't already know, but he was offered a place in the Texas League. What I find interesting about that, and I actually have a piece of memorabilia here from that game, is he played in a Texas League game after retirement with Cobb and Mickey Cochran and a couple of other players as a boost in attendance. And I've got a few photos here from that game and a ball that he brought home with the Texas League written on it. So found it ironic that he turned that down because he didn't want to go that far, but then wound up playing a game in the Texas League anyway. It was just like a couple inning spinoff or something, that they did just to, and it worked. I mean, it had incredible attendance in the game. His Oriole tryout didn't go that well. If you've read into his history, him and Jack Dunn, Frank went 2 for like 19 or 15 or something. And it wasn't a very good outing at all. And Jack Dunn sent him home. It was like, you can't hit, Another ironic aspect of that is when Frank did not play in 1915 in a contract dispute with Mac, Jack Dunn was the first one to be vocal and complain and say that Baker shouldn't be allowed to do that. And he should be punished in some sort of way through the league. And he was just really Mac was under a lot of pressure to do something with his contract. So I think that prompted Mac to say, all right, I've drawn enough attention. I'm going to sell his contract in New York and just let it be. So,
right.
His career with the Reading Pretzels was pretty impressive. That's where he went after he didn't do so well with the Orioles. He batted .299 in 119 games. Wow. That was enough to open Mac's eyes, and he inevitably went to the A's the following, or actually the end of that year, and played. I don't know. It was only like a handful of games, half a dozen games or something. And he ended up replacing Jimmy Collins on third base. And that's when he started playing for Mac. September 21st of 2008 was his first game. I'll put that in my notes.
Yeah, Chris. Wow. Thank you for sharing all that.
I don't know. I didn't want to, stretch it out too much, but I wanted to.
No, not at all.
No, so people in the chat are, pointing out these little tidbits of stuff are just not very well known. So I appreciate you sharing them. I think my other question is about kind of like what parts of his career in your eyes I feel like are lesser known, right? We kind of mentioned like we obviously know for his time he was a power hitter. You've talked to us about his defense a bit, but just generally speaking, what do you feel like about his career? You feel like people don't know enough about?
Well, I've gotten both ends of the spectrum in discussions from this. Some people are like, everybody knows about Frank Baker's career. And, I feel like from talking to a lot of people that they don't, simply because, Frank's career wasn't shared a whole lot. 13 years in the league probably hurt him. It wasn't a really long career as far as being exposed, but you see a lot of the same names, over and over again on the internet when you're going through baseball historical sites. And trust me, I don't mind it because that's what kind of led me into digging into his history. And he really his defense, and we talked about this earlier. His defense is something that you don't hear a whole lot about. But if you start digging into his defensive numbers, I think it was like 7 times he led in put outs at third base out of 13 years or something like that. He was also led the league 2 or 3 times, I believe it was, in double plays. And I'm sure that Collins and McGinnis had something to do with that as well. But either way, it was pretty impressive defensive numbers at third, and that's something you always hear the same story. And I'm not getting on any baseball sites. I appreciate it every time I see his history shared, but it's always the same. Hit the World Series home runs, and that made his name. His defensive play at third base was pretty impressive, along with really. There's an article here where he did an interview with a New York newspaper, and they were talking about the ball. So everybody says that he cried a little bit, said the ball changed and he was getting aged, so he wasn't hitting home runs like Ruth was. Of course, nobody was hitting home runs like Ruth was, but the the bottom line I think is he mentioned one time the year that he hit 11 or 12 home runs, he also hit the fence with a fly like over 30 times or something. So
wow,
a couple more feet in the air, and the record books would have looked a whole lot different. I mean, if and was as good as none in Cuz, but I don't know. I just found that interesting.
Yeah.
He was a pretty heavy hitter, and I don't. My grandfather was talking about it with me in the goose blind when I was a kid and stuff like that. Is the only time I could ever get him to open up. He never talked about his father's career all that much, but if we were hunting or something when I was a kid, I'd start egging him on, and he'd start telling me stuff. But he never really tried to hit home runs. He just tried to hit the ball deep because nobody played real deep.
Right. Yeah.
So you hit the ball over the head and get a couple bases out, a couple RBIs, and that was his tactics to play in the game. And that's shown a lot with him leading in triples, especially in 2009. For 1909 and 1912, he was a pretty good with hitting triples. Everybody knows his 4 years in the home runs, but his RBIs in 1913 were pretty impressive, and he led all of baseball in triples in 1912.
Yeah, wow.
So, I guess that's those balls smacking off the fence. But 805 OPS lifetime, 135 OPS plus. I mean, there are still even decent numbers today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love some of the stat comments in the chat. I feel like hopefully we're lighting up Frank's baseball reference page tonight. Someone pointed out he had back-to-back 40 double seasons as
Yep.
well. I mean, yeah, just really impressive stuff. We did have a question. I feel like if you're okay with it, maybe we can answer it in real time. It's a real good one. So Matt, and thanks for coming, Matt. He asked Chris, at what point in your life did you come to the realization that an ancestor was among the best baseball players in history? And in other words, when did it sink in for you?
It's a great question, because it actually, I probably didn't give him enough credit in my mind when I was younger. And even it happened. It happened pretty much when I started digging into his collection and trying to find the backstories on some of the stuff that I had here. And really, that's when the stats started coming in. And then I met some people that were pretty knowledgeable, more knowledgeable than I. I'm still learning today. I mean, I'm not going to call myself a historian. I know a whole lot about Frank's career, but I learned a lot from people who told me very impressive things about his career. The more I dug into his home runs, and 96 regular season home runs, only 5 weren't over the fence. If Honus Wagner hit 101, 46 of them were inside the park. So I'm not ragging on Honus; he's a friggin' man. But what I'm saying is, his home run name was in the clubhouse before the Philadelphia press ever even thought about stamping him with that. Mac and Bender especially were calling him home run. I got correspondence from Bender's wife here where they stayed in touch for years. He was really good friends with Charles Bender. And you know, Bender even said that, you know, you hit the ball harder than anybody I've ever harder than anybody I've ever seen. So
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for
so
the
yeah,
question,
it
man.
was actually relatively recently, Matt, to answer your question. I always knew he was a Hall of Famer, and that stands out. And then you've got a lot of argumentative people that are in the Hall of Fame at this point. People are starting you know, question people in the Hall of Fame, and I'm not one to do that. If they think that they deserve to be in there, then they deserve to be in there. You know, but Baker seems to check all the boxes. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Chris, I have a question for you. So, and I mentioned that, you know, Josh and I, we've been doing this for a year and learning a lot about things that we had no idea about baseball related. But one of the things that I've found, and I'm sure Josh would agree with me, like one of the words that comes up in our conversations, and has continually come up is community and just the baseball community. We've met so many amazing people, yourself included, who have been just really generous with their time and their knowledge and just resources, sharing stories like this. Can you talk a little bit about like Frank's legacy in the game of baseball, not just in Major League Baseball, but on your community?
yeah, it's a little strange because it's not discussed locally as much as you would think. I talk about it with people like yourselves and baseball historians and stuff, people on my page, much more than it's discussed around here. I don't. I was very reluctant to share much of Frank's history locally until pretty recently. But there is a legacy. There is people who know who he is. Uh, the Little League exists, obviously, that we discussed. He started that after visiting the Little League World Series with Ted Williams one year, and came home and told his wife, he says, I've got to do this. Like, he's like, what am I even doing if I don't have a local Little League for, so he started a Little League, and it still exists today. I throw the pitch in for it every year. He has got a display at the Eastern Shore League of Maryland Baseball Museum, which is at the minor league park for the Shorebirds, which are like a subsidiary team of the Orioles, but on the Eastern Shore. But uh, he has obviously a display in the Babe Ruth Museum in Baltimore, just because the family has, my grandmother actually donated his New York sweater to them. So they have that. Other than that, with the Little League and everything, you know, he's recognized one time a year. The ballpark's named after him, and honestly, you don't hear a whole lot about him. I don't really try to push it too hard. He had a display in the Talbot Historical Society around the time that my grandmother got sick, and she wanted me to get that stuff back before something happened to her. She knew that things weren't good, so she kind of asked me to get that, and so I got that stuff back, and others, you know, I kind of wouldn't mind having something, you know, back out there on display locally, but the interest doesn't really seem, it's more with you guys probably than it is, you know, locally as a whole.
I know that Josh, you had said when we were talking about this before, you said that there's the Little League field is pretty close to very close to where you are, like right near the family home.
Yeah, I can drive there in about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. It's not very far at all. Like I said, I can see it if I really want to. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, when I go to the ballpark, the parents are really amazed about the history, and I've taken a few things out there and displayed them on opening day just to, you know, make it a little bit bigger of an event. And you know, I help them out in any way that I can. They already have a bunch of amazing volunteers. So really backtracking on what I said, I probably should think about that, because even we were discussing that there are quite a few people that live locally in the town here that put forth a lot of effort every year to make sure that ballpark looks fabulous. And they're the same ones every year. they're doing it, and it kind of scares me what'll happen when they're not around or young enough to do it anymore. But it's one of the families. It's relative, great grandfather, I believe, is in the photo with him that we were discussing when he was with his new little league team, and one of those boys is one of the ones that takes care of the grounds at the field. So he's like 4 generations later, still taking care of the ball field. So there is a fair amount of local community support. I'd like to see more, like in the couple of the surrounding counties that he played baseball in and stuff, but at the end of the day, his history's 100 years old. So what do you, what can you do?
Yeah. We got to get a lot more younger people interested in baseball and in general. But Chris, I meant to ask you and to just backtrack for a sec too, because we're talking a little bit about his legacy, like beyond what he did on the field. You told us, I don't mean to put you on the spot, you told us a great story about his connection to Jimmy Fox a bit. And I wonder if you might share that story, just because that one stuck with me as a real cool one.
Well, I've read this also. So there's baseball historians that have caught on to this story. It's probably a little bit better, I guess, if it's told here with us tonight. But he managed the Easton Farmers Class D team in 1924, and Jimmy Fox was on that team. He was from Sothersville, Maryland, which is probably, again, it's not far from Ridgely. We're talking 40, 50 minutes from here. Big farm community, still is. It's beautiful. I go up there and buy hunting gear at a store in the area every year, and it's a beautiful area. Jimmy Fox came from there, played in Easton. Frank managed him, and Frank used to attend a lot of games. I have his season passes and stuff are still here, and he would occasionally frequent the ballpark. And sitting in the dugout at a Yankees athletics game one day, it was Huggins, Ruth, and a few other players. Obviously, Miller Huggins, the manager, was sitting in there, and Frank says, "Hey, I got a guy. You guys should scoop him up. I'm getting ready to cut his contract loose. Jimmy Fox is his name. Would you like to take him?" And he starts telling me about how well he can hit and everything. And Huggins stops him, and he says, "I'm not interested. I got a solid team, and we're not interested in any contracts right now. But we appreciated Frank." So from the way my grandfather told the story, Home Run was a little offended. He was like, "Here I am trying to get this guy, into the Yankees, and he's going to credit them well, I'm sure, and not even interested." So, like a couple innings later, he walks over to dugout with Mac, and Mac stops him in the middle of his spiel, and he's like, "If he's as good as you say, send him up here, Frank." And he ended up hitting over 300 home runs for the Athletics and batting something like I don't know, you guys are looking at stats more than I am probably. I think it's 325 or 323 or something he was batting for the Athletics. So he did them justice. For sure. That's how Matt got in. Now, there is a story that Frank got fired from the Easton Farmers for letting Matt go too cheap, and that is and is not kind of how it went down. There were a couple of guys on the board. So I have a letter here that I'll post in my site sometime. I guess would probably be something cool for people to see. But I have a letter here that was given to me by a local historian that kind of disperses that it was a salty ending. So they didn't really want him to leave. There were some people that were salty about it, and he ended up, I think, leaving the management because he didn't want to have issues ongoing with people that weren't happy with how much he had sold Fox's contract for. Yeah. So, I mean, you could say he got fired, but he really just kind of stepped away,
right.
For better interest. He was a very
Yeah, it's
non-confrontational person.
kind of wild to imagine Jimmy Fox on that Yankees team too.
Yeah, yeah, that would have been pretty
That would have been
magical.
something. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
Chris, you talk
yeah.
about having the letter, and obviously we can see kind of in the background, the on the walls, you got a ton of pictures. And there's a question from the chat that I think would pique everybody's interest here. It's a great question. Your family did an excellent job curating Frank's career. About how many items are there, and do you do anything specifically to care for these items?
yeah, that's another great question because I mean I can make you laugh a little bit. So my family did do a great job curating his career. Frank kept a lot of things, and there's things that aren't here that probably were here at one point. I know some home run balls that look just like the ones that I have here were sold. Um, they did a great job with it, but it wasn't taken care of like it should have been. There were some things that I found in my grandmother's bedroom closet um, that were very valuable things that were in a box with like a bunch of silverfish insects crawling around, and I don't know if they just weren't interested in the material or if I just found it in enough time that no damage was done. But
Mm.
um, that was one thing that kind of concerned me. And I have his mitt from his couple of years in athletics, and that was in really rough shape. And so, I mean, I talked to a few people that are highly knowledgeable in what they do, and they were nice enough to let me know what I could do to, what you would consider short term preserve it, and that would be to bring it back to life so that it doesn't just dry out and fall apart. It actually turned out incredible. It looks great, and I think it's probably going to be around for another 100 years at this point. So I'm happy with that. A few bats in his collection are in good shape. Balls, I just keep them in the dark. I don't let light hit anything. Um, I have his 1911 World Series jersey, one of them, and I did clean it. In a way that very nice gentleman by the name of Sean Hennessy uh, gave me pretty strict instructions on how to do that. So,
Wow.
and there was another guy. I don't know. There's actually a few that I could thank that helped me do that, and a lot of them have shown me. They proved to me that they could take care of them with the stuff that they had done with a lot of like minor league uniforms and stuff like that. So I just follow protocol, and it's great. It's in great
Yeah.
shape.
Chris, you kind of piqued your interest a little bit, I think, when you said that that home run built the house you're in. And I think someone asked sort of like if the house you're in, sort of with the beautiful paneling, is original construction, if there are any like sort of family special things about the house that you're in.
I appreciate that. This is the only room in the house like this. I've kind of adopted this room to my office, and it's got paneling in it. It's tongue and groove paneling, and it's like 1/4 inch thick, so it's nice stuff. This was honestly the room that my grandmother passed away in, and my grandfather passed away in at separate occasions, obviously. So it, it was a room that wasn't equipped for television or anything like that. So I didn't change any of that, but I did move a lot of the photos that I want to keep out of light and things of that nature in here.
Mhm.
So everything in here is an original. It's not a copy. So I try to. This room stays dark a lot of times, unless I'm in here working or something like that. But this is original construction. Yes. The room is relatively special just because, my whole family's basically been here. One half of my family's been here their whole lives. And I kind of grew up here. This was the room that I used to hang up all my hunting stuff with when when my grandfather and I would go hunting. So it
Yeah.
turned into the decoys you see were home runs. They were part of his duck hunting rig. And the photos, this one back here is a 1910 team photo. Everybody's in suits. The two above them are old timers games, one from Braves Field, and another one I think was actually at Fenway. There's Centennial Pano back there, and a couple of Hugh Jennings press drawings that he gave to Frank. So, or Hugh Doyle. I mean, so some pretty cool stuff in here, to be honest.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yep. So whenever somebody, if I've posted some things in some game use sites, and there's always at least one or two people who are like, "How do you know that he played with that?" And it didn't have anywhere else to go. You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
been here. It's been here its entire life. So
Right.
I mean, I can see like is that a team photo over I guess it would be your right shoulder in the back there? What team is that back there?
That's the 1910 Athletics.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's original. It's got the original white chalk pen writing is underneath of it.
Wow.
All of that, a lot of that stuff is on my Frank Baker site. I mean, if you went in there and dug in the photos, you're gonna find it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the picture on my screen is not very big, and usually I feel like with photos that old, it's hard to see detail even close up. But I can
they're
see
clear as a bell.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing.
It's amazing. But like people are like, "Oh, that old photo, man! An old photo in great condition is just as clear as it is. I mean, it's black and white, but it's just as descriptive as anything you'd find today."
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's amazing. I follow a few photo sites, and I had to just to get educated on the photos that I have. I got a few Conlins and stuff here, and it's I get lost in photos. They're a pretty big part of his collection. There's a lot of them between old timers games, between old timers games, between a lot of the events in Cooperstown. He went to a lot of Hall of Fame inductions and banquets and things of that nature. And the amount of photos that I have with him and Cobb, it's amazing how much time he spent with Ty Cobb in Cooperstown, like over the years. So it, dispels any myth of them having any issues. And I actually have a great article here. It's just a little snippet out of a piece of paper, but it's Frank discussing getting ill at the Mulbach Hotel, and they're at an old timers game out there. And it was like 1:30 in the morning. He started getting chest pains. He didn't feel good. It ended up being an indigestion, but he thought he was like having a heart attack and stuff. So Ty Cobb shows up at like 3 in the morning and sits there with him until the sun comes up. And I think that's a great story of, after the spiking incident and everything that, supposedly caused so much controversy, that they had that kind of relationship later in life. Is very interesting to me, to be honest with you. And they did the Texas League thing together.
Right.
Kyle was there that day too. So it was, it's just pretty cool. Like the deeper you dig into the history, like the more you find out and the more interesting it all becomes. Probably more so to me than a third or more of our viewers tonight. But I mean, I've been digging, finding out where he came from, and keeps me busy.
Yeah, I mean, no, honestly, and that's why we're here. Like like we said, we came across Frank's baseball reference page, and the first thing that caught our attention was the nickname home run. But I mean, there's obviously so much more history that you don't get just from reading the Saber page or the statistics. I guess that's a good segue to just more broadly, like how would you like Frank and his legacy to be remembered?
Well, he had one of his most famous quotes, if you know anything about his history, was I hope I never do anything to hurt baseball. So that's a pretty broad statement. Um, you got to think about the era that he grew up playing baseball in. So he was playing ball when the scandal happened, when the Black Sox scandal happened, and he saw a lot of players fold through that. Um, and who knows what all those guys knew, in all reality back then. So, um, the making a statement like that after it's all said and done and being as active as he was, after his career. I mean, the photos of him in Cooperstown with like I said, Cobb and Cy Young and Speaker and Frisch and all those guys, like he was with those guys deep all the time. And I just feel like he was a big ambassador for the sport at the time. Like he died in 1963, had a stroke in 1960, and was at the 1959 New York Old Timers game. So obviously he wasn't, always feeling like doing that. And he was very tied to his home life. He had 3 farms, managed a bank, was a tax collector, and he had a lot going on at home. So to climb on the train and go to old timers games and go to those banquets. And I mean, I got where you can see where he's been, the sports writers events and things of that nature. As this, he was very active. So I notice a lot of teams are having like ambassadors, for their teams nowadays at the ballpark a lot. I feel like he was kind of doing that a long time ago,
Yeah.
Um, he was also just a very mild mannered individual, and he didn't like any controversy. Didn't smoke, didn't drink, rarely cussed. There's one thing that said he didn't smoke, he didn't drink, he didn't cuss, but my father was real quick to say that he cussed a little bit because my father was almost 14 when he passed away, so he remembers him relatively well. And he was like, if he got angry enough, he did.
Yeah. Chris, you mentioned the Hall of Fame. I'm just looking, we got a couple more questions. So Frank was inducted in 1955. The question was sort of like, how proud was he about the Hall of Fame? And did he have any thought about feeling like he should have been in before 55? Or do you have any sort of like insight to that?
Great question. I can't speak for him on that in depth. I know because my grandfather was the kind of person that probably wouldn't dispel certain things no matter what. He was, especially as little as he would talk to me about things, but he talked to me about things enough. And I think he was upset that he wasn't in the Hall before 55. And I can tell you I could open a scrapbook right now and pull out any letter and hold it in front of this camera, and it would say, way past due, Frank, you should have been in. There's 100 of them here, and they all almost say the same thing. Either I've been wondering why you haven't been inducted before now, or this honor to you is way past due. You should be proud. So he was very proud. I think his quote was, it's better to be handed a rosebud at the last minute than for them to give you a rose garden after you're gone. So, if something like that was that quote. And he, that was in his Hall of Fame speech, because I think he was just thankful that he was alive to see that happen. I do think if I were to speak for him, I do think that he felt like he probably should have been in there. I think that he felt like there was a few things about his career that probably weren't mentioned enough, and over time. But at the same time, there's a ton of articles out here that that prove that he was topic of discussion quite a bit.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of people that felt like he should have been in before 55, and he probably was one of them, especially if that many people felt that way.
Right.
Yep.
Well, it's a good note too, because a lot of people tuning in tonight. Hopefully, we can all sort of like I said, I think we got some hits on his baseball reference page tonight. So hopefully, we can be a little more educated about his career tonight. I mean,
I
and on
use
that
it
note,
all the
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
When I
I think
update
we're
I
on it a
mean,
lot. So
my
yeah,
my my viewers in my Frank Baker page are probably tired of me rehearsing his home run dates every year, but I try to change it up a little bit. So I don't know. This year I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do different. And I got to come up with something soon because it's almost
yeah,
baseball season.
yeah,
But it puts it into a little bit more perspective for me when you document each home run.
yeah, yeah. Well, I want to say thanks to a few people and plug a few things as well. First off, I want to thank Saber, who helped us promote this event. I know there's a lot of Saber members in the chat as well, and they wrote a great bio about Frank that really helped us kick this off. So if you're not a member of Saber, definitely go to Saber and check that out. Appreciative of their support tonight. Chris, you mentioned the Facebook group you maintain, which is just a wealth of knowledge. If it's called Frank Home Run Baker, the $100,000 infield and beyond, you can search that on Facebook. There's just so many artifacts. I was looking at it in preparation for tonight. So many things we didn't hit. Letters from Babe Ruth to Frank, things from Old Timers Day. So if you're into baseball history, I definitely recommend going to find that on Facebook. And finally, just really appreciate everyone who came out tonight to watch. If you don't subscribe to us, we'd love if you consider doing so. We host a live stream about once a month, and we're posting videos all the time. We're normally playing Immaculate Grid, but this was a really nice change of pace. And yeah, I guess with that, Chris, thank you so much for doing this again with us and taking the time to chat with us. We so appreciate it.
No,
Yes.
I completely enjoyed it. I thank you guys for having me, and I got to say again, the people that tuned in tonight, I don't even know how many people are looking at me right now. So I'm sorry, but yeah, I appreciate all of you for taking your time just to sit in and listen to my great grandfather's history. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
We appreciate you too. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you soon.